We're so excited to share what we're doing here today. I have two guests with me. We have Justin Jacobson and Pablo Velez, and these gentlemen are going to explain this new initiative with the Esports Trade Association, where we are essentially helping international players and business professionals gain access to career opportunities in esports in the United States. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Justin, let's start with you. Give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you do day to day.
Awesome. Excited to be here, everyone. I'm Justin Jacobson. I'm an esports and entertainment attorney based in New York City, and I work with different professional athletes, musicians, DJs, gamers, streamers, coaches, casters, all different businesses and individuals in the esports and video game business, helping them with contracts, trademarks, copyrights, business stuff, and visas and immigration.
Fantastic. And Pablo, why don't you share with us what you are doing day to day in your career, in your role?
Great. Thanks for having me on as well, John. Pablo Velez. I'm the managing member of Velez and Cipriano PLLC. We're focused primarily on corporate immigration, so specifically to the esports space. We work on O1 and P1A visas for esports athletes and other folks in the industry, and we have a wider immigration practice that reaches all around the globe and also representing clients in all 50 states.
Fantastic. So let me take the audience back here a moment where, boy, this has been a minute we've been working on this, guys. I want to say, was it 6 months ago, maybe, Justin? Maybe longer than that. I received a phone call. And when your phone says Justin M. Jacobson on it, you pick that phone up. Or I did, at least. And so Justin called me and he said, John, I recognize a real need for this industry that I think the Esports Trade Association can help with. And Justin, I'll kick it over to you on your side of that conversation months ago.
Yeah, I think, as John mentioned, being a practitioner in this field for, 7-8 years at this point, helping different players and coaches and casters and personnel get visas, you've kind of noticed that there are certain hurdles at part of it. And as the ecosystem changes, different titles and different games have different requirements, where there might be a game like Fortnite that has really, a robust and high prize pool where people can compete online for it, but where you're located might not have the best, internet or, technical capabilities. So you might want to migrate somewhere else to live and be able to compete. But just because of the way the litigation and the legislation is structured, some of the criteria are very hard to satisfy. And, Pablo and myself have counseling clients who are trying to secure visas to come here and compete in tournaments and to get signed to teams, but we're encountering hurdles because they weren't able to satisfy some of these criteria. So it kind of got us talking of like, what is needed here and who could fill this gap? Obviously, there's not an industry-wide labor union or anything recognized by the National Labor Relations Board, as there are in most other, organized professions, from sports to music to videography to all these other creative and professional fields. So we kind of know that there was nothing like that. So at that point, we started to see what organizations might make sense. And being that, the Esports Trade Association kind of was one of the leaders in this facet, I've been involved in it, so I kind of know the individuals and the expertise involved. It was something that I thought made sense to see if it would work. And, I think that everyone seemed really receptive to trying to figure it out.
Well, I love it because, here at ESTA, we're not trying to blow smoke or smoke and mirrors or get people to join for no reason. We just truly want to help this industry. We want to provide sustainable growth for the industry. And this being such a global industry, this issue with visas, Tom Leonard in the comments there says, so many events do not come to the U.S. because of visa issues, which is a great point. Pablo, why don't you share your perspective on this and kind of those initial conversations that we were having with Justin, and then let's go into what exactly is this kind of point by point.
Yeah, absolutely, John. So, basically, we recognize this need in our own visa journeys, guiding clients through this process. So, first off, we have to start and just, put out there the fact that government has not addressed that, although they are, for a decade now, recognizing esports as a sport for visa purposes, the way that they structure the visas is not the same as it should be. So, for instance, for major league sports like baseball, football, basketball, hockey, that have completely different contract structures and completely different seasons, and the way that they work, as compared to esports that has sort of shorter seasons. Players change teams often. Tournaments can drop teams or individuals into different categories and things like that. It's a little bit more dynamic and needs a different solution. So we can't really use the evidence, that these professional teams use in order to get an esports athlete to the US. So basically, we found ourselves and, many other council that work with esports professionals that are coming into the US to compete, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole every time. And, one of the big things, and, this is a great thing about the conversation that you and Justin had initially, and just, using the ESTA as sort of a platform to at least allow for a centralized location, for athletes and other folks to come and get peer consultation letters. At least now they're able to get that at a centralized source that has credibility. So it's one less thing that USCIS has to scrutinize, and it's one less step that these folks have to take. And with all of this, as everyone knows, it's involved, timing matters, because a lot of times, you're trying to get these folks in the country at a limited amount of time, and going through the logistical hurdles of trying to figure out where you're going to gather some of this evidence is always a challenge. So it's just a great situation to have them come to a centralized source and be able to streamline at the very least that piece to begin with. So for that, hats off to the organization for taking all the steps in the right direction to sort of rectify this issue.
Yeah, and you make a really great point there, as this organization, this association that is kind of this central figure that is not biased, not tied to a publisher or a team or a league. We support the entire industry. A lot of people in the esports industry over the years have said, what's a trade association? Why do we need one? What do you guys do? And I'll tell you, one group who recognizes and understands what a trade association is are governments. Right? Every industry has its trade association, and we are the trade association for esports to support, protect, advocate for this industry. And so as players and business professionals are applying for these visas, when a government agency sees, oh, the trade association is advocating that this is a credible request, it goes a long way. Can you guys speak a little bit to the experiences you've had a little deeper with, people requesting these visas and some of the challenges when they don't have an advocate like ESTA to provide this letter?
Yeah, I'll kind of jump in here first and let Pablo kind of bring it from there. But I think the biggest thing is, each of these different visa categories have different criteria that you have to satisfy. So if you're not able to satisfy all the criteria, you start running into issues where the visa might not get accepted at all, or they might request additional information, which, as Pablo mentioned, kind of slows down the whole entire process, where something that might have taken a few weeks or a few months now takes double that time. And if you were planning to get, certain dates, an appearance, a tournament start date, a season start date, any of these more concrete dates, it might throw off your whole timeline. So I think the fact that these criteria are very stringent and, as Pablo had mentioned, they're a lot more easily satisfied in these other traditional areas. Like, people know what the NHL is. They know what the MLB is. They know what a minor league baseball team is. Whereas, 100 Thieves and FaZe Clan playing PUBG Mobile or Rainbow Six Siege or Valorant, this is, another language to some government officials sometimes.
Sure. Well, and a lot of times, you have people from the standpoint who they just haven't had a lot of experience in this new industry, and they are still at the point of, why are people watching other people play video games? And when you hear, yeah, I compete as a professional, or I'm a shoutcaster, or I work in production, or I activate brand partnerships, people reading these applications are like, what? that's a bit of a bigger hurdle to get over than I play hockey or soccer or football or things of that nature. Pablo, is that correct from your
Yeah,
experience?
absolutely. Absolutely. And just to piggyback off of that and, what Justin mentioned about timing, because everything's so time sensitive, just getting these folks to sort of get their documentation in order and, like you're saying, explain this new world to many of these folks is always a challenge. But at the same time, it's like the race is always against the clock, especially, in a post-COVID world where there's still backlog being dealt with at the consular level overseas since since March of 2020, when there is still visa petitions that are backed up there. So, every day really counts when it comes down to preparing this, and also the added challenge of having to basically explain an industry from scratch to immigration officers that, like you said, have never, really experienced this, don't know how to interpret it. And all the more reason why this particular, consultation letter is so vital, because when it comes to both the O and the P visa, there is a criteria that has to be met with respect to getting sort of a third party organization to sign off on the visa itself. Now, this usually comes in the form of a formal labor organization if one exists, but if one doesn't exist, the regulations allow for a peer group, which ESTA is holding itself out to be, which obviously it is, because it's the foremost organization in esports in the country with respect to organizing esports in a centralized way, to be able to write as a third party objective, basically confirming the credentials of the person who's going to come in. So it's not just, someone putting on sort of a press kit of what it is that they do and, touting their esports accomplishments with no sort of barometer for that. ESTA obviously holding out this letter and submitting it to evidence gives credibility to any kind of evidence put forward. So, this is a huge asset for attorneys that represent clients in this space, for the clients, for the US based teams, and for the US based organizations in general.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell me a little bit more? What are O and P US visas for those who are hearing this terminology for the first time?
Sure, absolutely. So the O visa is for an individual of extraordinary ability, and that could be extraordinary ability in any field. In esports, we typically deal with it in athletics. So we would basically make the case for an individual who's going to come over and show how they're at the top of their field, either in athletics, or if they're a caster, or if they're a coach, depending on what their specific background is. And we have to sort of compare them to others in the field and show that they're in the top tier there. And the way that we do that is we present their subjective evidence, giving their track record, any kind of statistics that can be given, any kind of notoriety if that's appropriate. And then what an organization like ESTA would do is that they would come in sort of at the end of this packaging situation, and they would evaluate all this evidence and objectively, critique it and say that this person is indeed an individual of extraordinary ability. That's in the O1 context. The P1 visa is for internationally recognized athletes, specifically P1A. So on that level, it's a little bit broader, because you don't necessarily have to show that you're at the absolute top of your field. And this is specific to athletes, so it wouldn't really count for some other criteria. But basically what you're doing here is that you're showing that you're an internationally recognized athlete. And that's also something that requires the third-party verification. So, basically it's the same kind of credentials put forward, their history in playing in specific games, their statistics, how they compare to others ranked in the specific game, how they compare to others ranked in their specific country, if they've competed internationally. And then once they present ESTA with all this data, then ESTA writes, again, a third-party objective letter just verifying all of this evidence and, based on their background, certifying that, they're indeed someone who is an internationally recognized esports athlete. So those are the two major differences there. But, the beautiful thing is that this letter really serves as an asset for both.
Fantastic. For those who have just joined, I'm here with Justin Jacobson and Pablo Velez. We're discussing the Esports Trade Association's consultation letter service. We are helping international players and business professionals in the esports space gain access to job opportunities through these visas. These gentlemen are experts, as you are hearing, and this is why you need a lawyer. I've had some times in my life where I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what these things mean. And you guys absolutely do. Just a little bit of a recap for people. The Esports Trade Association is providing this as an entity that is respected and recognized specifically by the U.S. government as a peer group, which can advocate the credibility of those who are requesting these types of visas. Speed is also something that we have identified here. A lot of these events are a little more last minute. Sometimes you're just going to have a few months before something that you need to be in the United States for to earn a living. And this is a way to ensure that you have all your ducks in a row and that your paperwork gets processed quickly rather than delaying months, making it a difficult process, or maybe you even losing out an opportunity to compete or to work a certain event. Justin, why don't you take us through, first of all, are there people who need this and people who don't, or does everybody coming to the U.S. to work an esports event need one of these visas?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that kind of the general rule is that if you're coming here for profit to earn income, whether it's you're getting signed to an organization that's paying you a salary, or you're competing in a tournament for tournament winnings, you're competing in a league, you're casting an event, you're doing a sponsorship appearance, or any kind of paid endorsement, this is where you're going to need it. You're going to need the appropriate work authorization in order to earn that income and be able to receive that funds from the U.S. based entity as a non-U.S. citizen.
Fantastic. And then why don't we go through, for those who are listening, they're saying, wow, I've needed this, or I want to share this with people who I know need it. I can tell you the most consistent piece of feedback since this went out through some esports media channels last week. I posted this Monday on LinkedIn this is so needed. Just time and time again, whether it's a text message or a comment on a post, this is so needed. This is what I'm consistently hearing. How can people take advantage of this? If I need one of these visas, what are my next steps? And Lindsay, in the background, if you can repost that link in the chat for everybody, that would be fantastic. But Justin, go right ahead.
Yeah, so the Esports Trade Association website has an intake form where both members and non-members of the association are able to fill out with the required information, submit a fee, and then the ESTA will review what you provide internally. So it'll be the similar documents that you'll be providing in your visa application in general. So usually an attorney or whatever professional is helping you prepare the application, might be involved, or they might be the one submitting it. Or if you're doing it on your own, you as the applicant would be submitting this, and after they review your application, then the organization would be issuing this letter, and this will become evidence that's part of your application, and will hopefully fulfill another criteria that you might not have fulfilled otherwise.
Thank you. Pablo, anything that you would add to that?
No, I think Justin's basically covered it, but I did want to address a question in the chat that's sort of on point and more of a technical question. But Josh Wilds writes, if a letter by the ESTA is going to be supplied as a peer consultation letter, how will that affect how you fill out the I-129? Since it discusses, whether an appropriate labor organization exists, and whether the required opinion is being submitted. So, to that point, just to sort of bring the distinction about the labor organization and the peer group. So, because the U.S. does not yet recognize any labor organization, although I don't want to speak for the organization, but I believe that, the ESTA is, looking to eventually become that. There is no labor organization that can officially write, or is that required in that sense, for USCIS. However, because the ESTA is the strongest peer group in the industry, that letter is being submitted on behalf of the petition in that sense. So that is, basically how to respond to that. It's a bit of a technical question, but, I think it's important because a lot of attorneys would want to know, if they're going to represent an esports athlete, how this gets addressed. Just to sort of go into how Justin and I have addressed it in the past, basically clients have had to scramble around and look for industry experts that may have been, loosely connected or whatever it is, to provide a letter. But now the issue being solved here is that you have become the central point for getting these kinds of letters. So it completely solves that issue, and it centralizes and, sort of generalizes everything.
Thank you for articulating that. Once again, you guys see why we are working with these fantastic esports attorneys here. All these technical questions, how to navigate this space, without folks like Justin and with Pablo, you can quite literally be sitting on the sidelines, away from the event you're competing in or the one you're producing. I want to talk a little bit about the cost. That might be a question that people have. First of all, we're always looking for opportunities to add value to our members. We want to support our members in every way possible. So there is a lower cost if you're an Esports Trade Association member, but you don't have to be a member if you're not. If you still want this service, it's just going to be a little bit more. We do that by respecting and valuing our members. Justin, I'll start with you. Can you speak a little bit to the reason why there's a cost for this letter?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously this is a very highly specialized and nuanced area that is, there are only so many, individuals, let alone professionals, that are able to competently speak on this. You have to have a certain level of expertise and knowledge that's, provable by certain, independent criteria. So in that regard, there aren't that many organizations overall that would even be able to speak on this. So then when you come with, the actual intake and being a small organization, just the logistics of preparing these letters, reviewing the documentation, because, if the ESTA is going to provide this recommendation letter, they want to make sure that they thoroughly reviewed everything you provided, that they can verify and double check and do their own due diligence before they, provide this letter. So all of that intake and review and, double check and fact finding to substantiate what you're submitting is all the costs and, the time related to it. And what's nice is that it's a pretty similar price to what other similarly sized and even sometimes bigger organizations do, as it really lets individuals receive this unique service that really helps them grow. And when you look at the overall cost of potentially petitioning and accepting a visa, the cost is pretty negligible compared to what you're spending to actually obtain the visa and what you usually can earn if you're going to be obtaining this visa. So it's really just another documented expense that's necessary in order to obtain this. So it's kind of this built-in cost just because of the legwork that goes into actually preparing and issuing and vetting each, potential applicant.
Absolutely. And for specific pricing, you can see that on the intake form, which you can find under Get Involved at esportsta.org. This is we're operating with best practices here. Also, the level of pricing is consistent with what we're seeing in other industries. Pablo, another aspect that's interesting that I'd love to get your feedback on is this also creates a healthy type of a barrier to ensure that the people requesting these letters are qualified, are sincere, are truly in need of this service. Can you speak a little bit to that aspect?
Sure, absolutely. So, on that point, that's one of the reasons why the government, even requires such a process, because, they basically understand that the reviewing officers are only going to have sort of a layman's understanding of any specific industry unless they've experienced it themselves, right? And on the esports side, this is brand new to anyone who hasn't ever been involved with it. So, all the more reason that it's so important for them to be able to vet candidates and things like that, and have sort of a reputable organization behind that. So just the fact that there's a fee behind it is actually industry standard for this particular visa category, because basically all of these labor organizations do require a fee for the same process. So I mean, this is very standard to these particular visas in general. But outside of just there being a general cost of the letter, the fact that a reputable organization that understands the industry and understands the criteria is able to speak on it, it just lends to the credibility of that particular applicant. And it's almost like, in terms of a barrier to entry, more and more the government's going to see, ESTA's letterhead and saying that, they're vouching for individuals that indeed, make an economic impact in the US, and, all of these things keep coming through. The more credibility that's also going to build for the industry in general. So, I mean, it's important on many levels.
Thank you for explaining that. Justin, I'd love to just recap. By the way, for those of you who have joined recently, I'm here with Justin M. Jacobson and Pablo Velez. We're discussing the Esports Trade Association's consultation letter service that was just announced at the end of last week. Justin and Pablo have been instrumental in not just bringing awareness of this, but facilitating this whole process so that ESTA can better advocate for the international esports industry. The goal here really is to help both players and business professionals gain access to job opportunities happening in the US in the esports industry. Justin, why don't you give us a concise recap on what exactly this is?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, this is a paid service where foreign citizens that are trying to obtain a job or earn income here in the US would, as part of their O1 or P1 visa application, would be petitioning the Esports Trade Association to prepare one of these consultation peer advisory letters to become part of the evidence for their application. So if you're a player from a different country who's going to get signed by an esports organization based in the US, or if you're a player or a coach or caster from another country who's coming to compete in an event, cast an event, work an event in any capacity, these are the kind of visas that usually would obtain. So obviously the criteria are different based on the level of, your notoriety. The O1 is usually for individuals of extraordinary talent that are, a much higher threshold. And then the P1 is for more internationally recognized, competitive athletes and individuals that can kind of show this level of achievement in their particular field. So in addition to some of the other evidence that you would submit, this becomes part of your application and further reinforces the level of achievement of the particular individual. And it helps get them to that point. Because if you don't get this visa and you try to compete in a tournament or work an event, or come into the US and sign with a team, you might not get paid. You might encounter issues. You might potentially be in violation of certain visa laws by being an unauthorized worker and competing in something. And again, if you're competing in a tournament or league, you might be violating the rules. Or, as someone who looks at player contracts, you might be violating your contract that mandates that you have proper work authorization, that you obtain or you have whatever visas are necessary to fulfill your obligations. So it becomes a potential contract breach, or worse if you don't, obtain the proper documentation before you enter. And I think Pablo can kind of,
Great points.
touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, Pablo, I'd love to get your take on that. I mean, the people who are in need of this are either experts in the games that they play or experts in the specific disciplines. And all this visa stuff, I mean, it's difficult to navigate. A lot of people don't even realize they need it, or you recognize you need it, but you don't know what to do. You don't know you need a letter like this. You apply, you're delayed, you miss the event, or you're scrambling. Yeah, go ahead and expand a little bit on Justin's words there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is sort of the most vital and fundamental thing that we do in the immigration law space, is to basically make sure, especially on the employment-based side, to make sure that folks have the proper work authorization to come into the U.S. To do whatever it is that they're going to do for a living here, because performing any kind of labor, skilled or unskilled, in the United States requires work authorization. So this isn't, for instance, the business tourist exception where you can come and interview for jobs, where you can come and, as a business owner, sign leases and contracts, market your services without actually performing skilled or unskilled labor. But once you're ever in violation, and here's one of the big things, although immigration doesn't live in every corner of the world and they're not watching every move you make, if you're ever on their radar and you attempt to come into the country and they have evidence that you have not been admitted, they will turn you right back around. And they'll also potentially put a ban on your reentry. So what ends up happening is that you have to, on top of apply for a visa, and for folks who are from visa waiver countries, meaning that we have reciprocity with their country as U.S. citizens, that we can buy plane tickets and go visit them for 90 days at a time and come out with, no questions asked. They lose that for life. So they have no choice but to get a visa. And then once they get this visa, they also have to apply for an inadmissibility waiver. And, that's several thousand more dollars that represent legal fees. And it's completely discretionary whether or not that's going to get granted. So it's just so fundamentally important to do everything correctly. And, unfortunately, a lot of times that doesn't come up until something like that does happen. Someone shows up to the airport and customs takes them aside, a secondary inspection, and goes through their cell phone, because there's no Fourth Amendment rights in customs. They can look at whatever they want. If you have something in a different language, they'll bring someone in who speaks or writes that language to interpret that. So, you're completely defenseless there. So it's important to just have all these things taken care of so you don't run into these issues. And also for the U.S. employer, so they don't get flagged anytime somebody's coming over and they're sponsoring a visa. There's no mark on them as well. So it's vitally important to just get this right, from the beginning.
What I'm really getting from you, Pablo, is just the sheer importance of this. This is not something that's like, hey, it's a nice to have. This is, you have to have this. And there are some pretty serious consequences if you're not going about this in the right way. The first thing when Justin brought this up to me that went through my head was, oh yeah, being able to speed up, the processing. Yeah, the worst thing that could happen is you miss an event, right? Especially a pro player. Players are switching teams all the time. These are some shorter careers typically. But what I'm hearing from you, Pablo, there's some lifelong consequences here that can really not just affect your career, but your personal life as well, if you are not doing these things the right way. And it's folks like you and Justin who are experts in this, who can really help people navigate this space effectively to ensure that they don't do it the wrong way.
Yeah, that's absolutely on point. There's and when it always comes down to, employment immigration being that way, there's always the business consequence, which is the financial damages done, to that individual and on the US side. But, the greater immigration consequences are, putting all of that aside, are you even admissible into the US, after anything happens? And that has longer term consequences, and we're talking about, depending on the violation, anywhere between 5-year to 20-year bars, sometime lifetime bars, not necessarily for, business violations, but, that's really the scale that they look at it. So, it's just vitally important to get this process correctly, to use professionals that know what they're doing, because it's very simple to make any kind of error here. And, immigration doesn't sort of go, oh, well, I didn't know that, isn't really a defense. So,
right. And I think a point to kind of, that someone brought up in the chat and the comment is, working on the process early and giving yourself time to gather the evidence in case something does come up, because you don't want to rush it and then say, okay, well, I'll figure it out when I get there. It's like, no, you're going to land in America and it's not going to go the way you envision. This is not a movie where things are just going to turn out, how you think it's going to be. It's, if you don't secure the proper authorization beforehand, you don't get the proper visa stamps, in your passport, whatever documentation you need in hand, you could jeopardize everything, both, the immediate and more of a long-term, outlook. And, what's nice is that, the government agency has a premium processing option, which actually gives you the ability to speed up your application to get an answer much quicker than if you went the non-premium route. And, again, when you have these tight deadlines, it's sometimes the only option that you might have at that point, because the other is not getting it in time and, either missing the event entirely, coming late. We've seen it in, many formal leagues, certain players or teams not being able to start on time or missing the preseason because they didn't get, proper documentation in time. So there's this whole timing component that needs to be addressed and thought about so that you avoid these issues that Pablo mentioned, because violation of status is a big issue.
And we also have expedited options for the letter as well. So in the chat, Precious, absolutely right. You want to get started on this stuff as soon as possible. Sometimes you may be notified last minute, right? Hey, this is happening. Get over here. And so it's great to know that there are those expedited options when you need them. I want to share just a little bit about the Esports Trade Association for those who are listening, for those who are watching who do not have a lot of experience with us. I'll tell you, I just feel such a privilege to be able to be part of this. When Justin and Pablo came with this idea, they said, hey, there's something that is needed on all these different sides, that we see the Esports Trade Association as the trade association for the esports industry, which is recognized and respected by these government immigration agencies, that you can really help with. And that's why we're here. We're not here to throw a conference and get rich. We're not here to trick a bunch of people into becoming members. We are here to provide sustainable growth for the esports industry by bringing together the endemic esports community alongside, I call them complementary experts, people who are experts in business, in law, like Justin and Pablo. Can you guys just briefly share a little bit of your experience being members of the Esports Trade Association, and how has it benefited you?
Yeah, I think I've been for maybe about, over 2 years now, and I've been on some committees, and, they have some really great networking and Zoom conferences, and, I've been on some of the podcasts, and I definitely think it's, amazing, obviously, for the networking. I think that kind of goes without saying, being able to, be in conversations and part of an organization with, other people who are doing what you're doing, whether they're doing it from a different angle or you've, met them, and just being able to have that familiarity with them and start talking to them, I think is always beneficial. And then in terms of being able to talk to other people that really understand what you're talking about. I know at the beginning of my career, a lot of it was trying to explain to people what esports was and what the video game was. And yes, kids are making thousands or not millions of dollars playing video games. And, this Fortnite thing is real. And, being able to be around people that they're kind of doing this on the daily basis, is really kind of invigorating. And everyone from different angles, whether you're working at a developer, a production company, attorney like myself, or anyone else, whether you're an actual talent or, someone who's just on your voyage to become that, there are ways to, you know, interact and grow. So I think that that was really, you know, important to me, was having this platform that had so many diverse people all within this same, you know, core, you know, field.
Thank you for that. You know, it's really encouraging when we hear members share what some of the value is, because that's why we're here. Like I said, not to pat ourselves on the back, but to add real value. Pablo, getting involved with ESTA recently, what is your experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like you said, I've been involved recently. Justin actually brought me in because we've been colleagues for over a decade. And, you know, it's just incredible value. I think that, you know, as the industry grows, especially exposure in the US and, you know, in the very recent years to come, esports is going to be like ubiquitous. Like, you're going to see it everywhere. Everyone's going to know what it is. And it's just so important to have an organization like this that sort of brings in folks from all walks of life in order to share their expertise, in order to, you know, sort of help the community grow as a whole. Because, you know, you do have your folks who are, you know, the professionals, who are the gamers, who are involved in that capacity. But then you have folks, like you said, who are sort of, you know, the trusted advisors, like the attorneys, the accountants that are involved in advising on that end, marketing folks, you know, and all other professionals, and being able to meet these folks and, you know, sort of share our expertise and how we can all grow together has been, you know, extremely valuable.
Yeah, you know, I'm a member as well. I'm board chair, but I'm also, you know, a paying member. And, you know, two major benefits that I experience. One is our membership directory. If you're a member, you log in, there's a member directory categorized by discipline, where you say, man, I need a lawyer. You know, I need to figure out how to get in this country. Or you're saying, hey, I need somebody who understands partnerships and marketing, or, you know, I'm looking for research in the industry, et cetera. You can find all sorts of people. How to produce an event, you know, oh, I want to get a hold of the sports commission, you know. And then we also have curated research. So in the back end, we have a whole research archive. This helps me so much when I'm working with clients. I'm putting a presentation deck together. You can go in there and, you know, everything that has been across the interwebs that is credible and validated by our research committee has been pulled together. And then we also have some unique research there as well. The networking is another thing that I really appreciate, has benefited me. For those listening, a couple opportunities to get involved or to evaluate if you want to get involved with the ESTA. Actually, tomorrow we have our monthly coffee connections. That's at 10 a.m. EST, which would be 7 PST, I believe, and 9 CST for those taking notes at home. What we do, it's very simple, but it's very effective. We get people together on a Zoom call, and we simply share, what are you working on, and who are the types of people you're trying to connect with. And what happens in real time, I've seen it happen again and again, is somebody in that room, they hear that, and they're like, you need somebody to produce an event? I do that. You need someone to help make sense of this, or I know the person who you need to connect with. And we see relationships building and even deals begin in real time. The second thing is our Esports Trade Association conference, which is this month. I can't believe it's August already, but it is going to be August 20th through 22nd in Chicago. You can come meet Justin and Pablo. I mean, that should be enough to get people to come. But we're going to have a number of publishers. Coca-Cola is the title sponsor. We have a number of other companies who are both within the esports industry and outside. So if you're looking to gain connections with companies, with people, both esports and inside and outside of the esports industry, and have some great experiences. We're doing a Chicago Cubs game at Wrigley Field on the 20th, just providing a great experience for people to network. And then we have panels and experiences the next 2 days. I don't want to belabor the point, but I do want everybody listening, if you're not already planning to come, we want to see you there. It's going to be fantastic, and you can be part of making it even more fantastic. For those who have joined recently, just a little recap here. We are here with Justin M. Jacobson, Pablo Velez, And these guys are esports attorneys who are experts in helping people gain visas to come to the United States to compete or to be working behind the scenes on events. To find the intake letter for this consultation letter, you can go to esportsta.org, and it is going to be under the Get Involved drop down menu. So please check that out. You can see everything associated with ESTA at esportsta.org. Also, if you have any questions, we're going to be wrapping up here in just a few minutes, but any additional questions, please put those in the chat. We have a couple for you here, gentlemen, as I've been rambling. We have, let's start here with Ron is saying, I checked the plans for companies and the maximum is for 30 people. Is there a possibility to get customized plan for a larger groups? So is there, and if not, what is the thought or the reason behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously up, to the trade association, depending on what their capacity is and, how they feel, they're able to, handle that kind of load, So I think that's one, a consideration depending on what, you're able to do from an internal.
The bandwidth of the processing and writing the letters, things of that nature. So what I would say with that, if you have a question, just reach out to our office, info@esportsta.org. Shoot us a message and say, hey, I've got 50 people who need to come. What do we do? And we will figure out a solution for you. Josh has a question here as well. Is there a way to get an extended version of the letter to serve as evidence of a written statement from a recognized expert detailing the person's or team's international recognition for a P1 application?
So just to take that one as well, obviously I'm a member of the organization, not really, a decision maker on that end. But the way that I believe that the price structure exists and the capacity of folks that are working on these particular letters, that will be an option. It's going to be a little bit more of a custom option, but this, Josh has a great question because it fits another criteria of the P1 visa that needs to be met. And it's also something that the ESTA can assist with as well. And it's very much germane to, what this program is already. So, I believe, again, I don't want to speak for the organization in that sense, but, this is just going to be, sort of a custom extended version. And it's just a matter of making contact with the organization, to figure out pricing on that end.
Yeah, I would say anybody who has questions about this, shoot us an email. That's going to go, we're going to get it right to Pablo and right to Justin. So we're going to have experts who are going to be able to give feedback on these things. But, part of this is anytime you're developing a structure for something that is, I don't want to say automated, but as, creating a process, we've got to standardize things as much as possible so it goes as smoothly and as quickly as possible. But for those custom questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We promise to do everything we can to support you in being able to access these job opportunities. Gentlemen, we have just a few minutes here. Is there anything that you feel we missed that is important that the audience here hear, or anything that you'd like to recap and touch on to make sure that it's hammered home?
Yeah, I mean, I think to kind of just bring it all together, I think it's really important that everyone out there really understands the need to handle this process properly, to make sure they have competent people around them while they're doing it, because you don't want to do this wrong. It ends up slowing down or potentially derailing your entire, process and application if you're applying for the wrong category or not providing the right information. So I think it's really important for everyone out there to just understand that this is a serious process and it's something that they need to devote the time and effort and, the resources to do it right, because it has a large impact. And I think that's why the organization saw the value in it, is because it does have this big impact. It opens up our country to be able to have more events, to be able to have more teams based here, just to continue to grow it on all levels.
Appreciate that. Pablo, anything that you'd like to highlight or add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you again, John, for having us on, and just, what a great resource this is going to be moving forward for the international folks coming into the U.S. To be involved in the industry. And, I think this is sort of the first of many steps that the ESTA will take in order to facilitate and sort of grow the international exposure and international access to the U.S. esports market. And it's really just a win-win, for the organization, for esports as an industry, and also for the country economically. I mean, it's just such a growing field that it's very exciting to, be here at sort of the beginning stages of all this.
Absolutely. If there's one thing I would want our industry to hear from the Esports Trade Association is we're here for you. We're here to serve and support you. And this is one of the great examples of how we are not just saying we're going to do it, but actually doing it by helping players and business professionals gain access to these visas more easily to be able to make a living doing what you love. So if you have any interest or questions about the Esports Trade Association, visit esportsta.org. You can also reach out to us directly, info@esportsta.org. Tomorrow morning is going to be a fantastic opportunity to meet and greet virtually as we have our monthly coffee connection. So please reach out about that. You can see invites on our LinkedIn as well. And then we would love to see you at the conference in Chicago, August 20th through 22nd. It's going to be a fantastic time. We're going to have folks like Justin and Pablo here, fantastic companies like Coca-Cola, who's our title sponsor, if you're looking to engage with somebody from a big brand. And we have members of publishers, of teams, all sorts of folks would be fantastic to connect with. Justin and Pablo, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for your expertise, and thank you for joining me here today to detail exactly what this program is all about.
Our pleasure. Thanks everyone for listening, and check out the organization. They're doing some great stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you.